Romance book lovers, welcome to Tales from the Heart. I am Jenna Harte, and each week I post new episodes from my stories of crime and passion. Right now we're listening to With This Ring I Thee Kill, Book 3 of the Valentine Mysteries. This week is Episode 8, Chapter 8. Now, if you'd like to read along or get ahead in the story, you can get With This Ring I Thee Kill from your favorite ebook retailer, or you can save by buying direct from me. Now, With This Ring I Thee Kill is the third book in the series. If you missed Book 1, Deadly Valentine, you can listen by checking earlier episode postings, or if you'd like to read it, you can get the ebook for free at my website, jennaharte.com. Book 2, Old Flames Never Die, is available in earlier episode postings or available at your favorite ebook retailer, or you can grab it for less through my shop. Tales from the Heart is posted to podcast platforms and YouTube each week. These episodes are edited to censor intimate content. If you'd like to have a version that includes the spicy bits, plus early access, behind-the-scenes information about the stories, bonus content, and more, please join me over at Ream Stories. You can learn more at reamstories.com/Jenna Harte. Now, never miss the mystery of romance by hitting the subscribe button, and remember that all the details and links you might need are just a click away in the description. Now, snuggle up, get comfy, and enjoy the show.
Chapter 8. Tess woke the next morning, still feeling guilty over the attack on her friend. It could have been me. It should have been me. But how could she and Jack have known there was a third man? Or more? But with Tim and Cal in jail, there had to be someone else pulling the strings. But who and why? She turned to see if Jack was awake. He lay next to her, lost in thought as well. His eyes were distant, but his features were grim. She wondered if his thoughts were the same as hers. When and how would this end? He turned to her and smiled.
"Hello, sleepyhead."
Hello yourself.
She snuggled against him, resting her head on his chest to hear the steady beat of his heart. The world around them was full of uncertainty, but here with him, she was safe, secure, and blissfully happy.
"I'm planning to go to the office for a few hours. Do you have any plans?"
Tess lifted her head.
It's Saturday.
"It's the perfect day for me to go in. No one is there."
No one meaning Brad to hassle you about taking his office?
Jack smiled. His fingers played with one of her curls.
"Something like that. What about you? What do you have planned?"
I want to visit Cam. Maybe I'll bring her some chocolate peanut butter balls.
"I can take you in."
He said.
Don't be silly. You don't need to chauffeur me around.
"I'd prefer it if you'd let me drive you."
The words were polite, but the tone behind them sounded like an order. Tess's hackles rose. Before she could respond, he said,
"Someone is still gunning for us. I'd rather you stay here where you'll be safe or let me take you."
Who's going to chaperone you when you go out?
She lifted her head to look at him.
"Tess, please don't be unreasonable."
Unreasonable?
She was proud that she'd kept her voice calm despite the growing annoyance.
You're the one bossing me around and I'm being unreasonable?
"I'm not bossing."
From where I stand you are, and I don't like it. You're not the boss of me.
She rolled away from him but didn't leave the bed. He let out a frustrated sigh.
"I just want you safe. Is that too much to ask?"
It is if you think I'm going to live my life with you as a bodyguard.
She knew she was overreacting, but lately, too much of her life was being dictated by others.
"Why are you making this so hard?"
Why are you?
Jack rubbed his hands over his face and let loose a string of expletives.
You go do what you have to do,
Tess said.
I'm going to plan a wedding, but if I want to go somewhere, I will.
She got out of bed, threw on a robe, and strode toward the door.
"Don't walk away from me,"
he warned.
"We need to finish this."
There's no finishing it unless you stop being a Neanderthal.
She expected him to follow her, but when she got out into the hallway, she looked back to where he lay silent, his eyes staring up at the ceiling. She was relieved that the discussion was over, but worried that he'd given up so easily. Not that she wanted him to continue to boss her around, but Jack usually worked harder to get his way. Was he learning that she was hard-headed too, or simply losing interest? Not wanting to put too much into his lack of action, she headed to her office. Her fax machine beeped, indicating she'd received a fax. When she saw the senator's official stationery, she wondered why she'd gotten the fax and not Jack. That is, until she saw the multi-page list of names. Reading the note, she learned he was giving her a list of people to invite to the wedding. The only names she recognized she knew because they were political figures, not because she'd ever met them. The majority of the list she'd never even heard of. She shook her head. All her hopes for planning a small, intimate wedding were out the window.
Tess,
Jack leaned against the doorway to her office.
Jack, I'm not in the mood.
too bad. You can't just walk away from problems. We need to talk this out.
You don't want to talk it out. You want me to give in, but I'm tired of giving in. So much so that I don't even want to have this stupid wedding.
Jack's eyes flared.
Don't you dare do that. You agreed to marry me, and you're going to if I have to drag you up the aisle.
He shook his head.
I can't believe you threatened not to marry me. How cold.
I didn't threaten not to marry you.
She worried that the argument was about to involve words they'd never recover from. He threw his hands up in exasperation.
Yes, you did. In fact, you called it stupid.
I said I didn't want a wedding, not that I didn't want to get married.
What the hell's the difference?
You can get married without a wedding,
She said. He stared at her for a long moment.
You mean elope?
Yes.
I thought we agreed to a wedding in front of friends and family.
They'd agreed, but he hadn't done much to help since the planning had begun.
What is wrong with you?
His voice was lower, but still exasperated.
Why do you always hide when something is hard?
Tess felt her temper flare.
This is not my wedding, and if you helped, you'd know it's not your wedding either. But since you want it so bad here, you take care of it.
She tossed the senator's fax to him.
Don't forget to invite the 200 people the senator wants. And here is my mother's list. None of them will come, but you have to invite them anyway. Be sure to get the save the dates out by the end of the month. You'll need to order them by early next week to get them in time.
She tossed all the papers at him, and then in a final tantrum, ran her hand over her desk, sweeping the remaining papers on the floor. Feeling satisfied, she walked out of the room.
Jack looked over the mess. His emotions had gone from angry and hurt to completely stunned.
What the hell are save the dates?
He bent down to collect the papers, looking over them as he did. She was right. He hadn't been involved in the wedding planning, leaving it all to her. Except as he looked over her papers, he realized she wasn't being allowed to create the wedding they'd talked about. Her mother and the senator were making demands they had no right to make. Why didn't she just tell them to go to hell? He scooped up the remaining papers, wondering if eloping was a better idea. It would certainly have them married sooner, and the sooner the better. He wanted their commitment set, permanent. But he couldn't let go of the desire to share their day with people they loved and who loved them. He cleaned up her office and set out to find her. She locked herself in the bathroom.
I'm busy.
He could the water running and realized she was taking a bath. Good, she needed to calm down.
It's not safe to lock the door when you're bathing.
If I drown, you can knock the door down.
Jack swore as he reached over the door frame for the key to unlock the door. He pushed the door open, not caring he was interrupting her pity party.
The lock means I want to be alone.
Too bad.
She laid her head back and closed her eyes. Fine. She could pretend he wasn't there, but she would hear him out.
I'm sorry.
One amber-colored eye peeked open.
Not about asking you not to go anywhere,
Her eyes snapped shut.
but about not paying more attention to what was going on with the wedding. I hadn't realized what a fiasco it was becoming. I wish you'd told me, but that doesn't forgive the fact that I wasn't more involved.
She didn't respond.
I want a wedding.
She started to sink down under the bubbles. He reached out, grabbing her under the arm to keep her from escaping.
Hear me out, Tess, or I'll drain the tub and haul you out of it.
She stopped but still didn't look at him.
I want a wedding, but only with our closest friends and family. I figure that's not very many people. So few that we could have the wedding here, or better yet, in Jefferson Tavern at the house. And since we don't need to rent that, we could have the wedding as soon as we can find a preacher who can marry us.
One eye opened.
What about food, flowers, music?
He shrugged.
I don't need them, but if you want them, I'm sure we can find people who can accommodate our short notice. But I'm not sending any save the dates, whatever those are, and I'm not inviting hundreds of people I've never met.
Both her eyes were open, and her face, once frowning in annoyance, looked at him with hope.
We'll be breaking all sorts of rules,
She said.
That will make it more fun.
He leaned closer, hoping he might steal a kiss.
So what do you think?
I think I want a wedding.
In an instant, her hands were on his robe lapels, pulling him into the tub. His robe was soaked and covered in bubbles, but what did that matter when Tess was wet, warm, and naked in his arms?
Tess opened Cameron's hospital room door quietly, not wanting to wake her if she was sleeping. Cameron was sitting up in bed, intently looking at a laptop screen. Tess frowned.
You're not working, are you?
Cameron looked up, startled. She slammed the lid of the laptop down, but not before Tess saw what was on it.
I hope you're not planning to steal my man.
Tess opened the lid to see what Cameron had been reading about Jack.
Because if you are, I'll have to break something.
I don't think there's anything left to break.
Cameron said.
But no, just looking out for my best friend.
Tess smiled.
What have you learned?
He's almost too perfect, which should send up a red flag, but it doesn't. Do you know he dated Ava Dumont?
Yes,
Tess said.
it makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It does. Is her hair really red?
Cam,
Tess shook her head.
I don't want to know.
So you don't know if she and he...
I'm sure they did, but I'm not going to ask about it. It's bad enough that she's gorgeous and tall and...
I bet she has ingrown toenails or something.
One can only hope.
Tess set the box of chocolate confections on Cameron's bedside table, then sat on the edge of the bed.
It still boggles my mind sometimes that he chose me.
Oh, please. I can tell you exactly why he chose you. You're smart, funny, make fantastic chocolate, and have the best booty of French undergarments known to women. What man wouldn't want that?
Tess laughed.
Well, since you put it that way.
What boggles the mind is that 3 years ago you blew this town and made a firm commitment to celibacy. Now you're engaged again. I never saw that coming.
I didn't either. I tried to live like you do, the all-work, no-play life. And it worked, or I thought it did. And then he was in my life, and it was like everything had been askew. But he put it straight.
You should write a romance novel.
No, Jack should write a romance novel. You should hear the stuff he says.
Sex stuff?
Sometimes.
Tess was no prude, but neither did she want to share her and Jack's most intimate adventures, so she decided to change the subject.
What about you? What brought you back to the States? Are you here to buy art or something?
Cameron shifted, wincing as she did.
Nah, just needed a little R&R.
Tess didn't buy it.
No, really. Why are you here?
You don't believe me?
Tess shook her head. From the day they'd met, Cameron was always doing or planning to do something. Tess had never known her to take R&R. Cameron sighed.
Well, if you must know my innermost secrets, I tried your route, love ever after, but it didn't turn out so well.
Oh, Cam, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, it's been over for a few months. I tried to put myself in my work, which should have worked but didn't because everywhere I went he was there. Not him really, but the memories. Europe is romantic until the romance dies. Then it's heartbreaking.
Tess took her friend's hand.
I'm glad you're here, although getting pushed down a flight of stairs isn't much better.
The drugs aren't bad, though.
Tess smiled.
Do your parents know you're here? Should I call them?
Yeah, but they're in out-of-the-way New Zealand somewhere. By the time they'd get here, I'd be out, so I told them not to come.
When do you get out?
I don't know. Soon, I hope. My doctor is cute, but the nurses scare me.
Tess laughed.
Why don't you come stay with us when they let you out? I'm sure you'll still need some respite, and you can help me put together a shotgun wedding.
Shotgun, huh?
I'm not pregnant. I just don't want all the pomp and circumstance of a big wedding.
Your parents must be thrilled.
Sarcasm laced Cameron's tone.
They don't know yet.
Cameron's eyes widened in surprise.
You have changed. Or shall I say, you're back to your old self.
Jack closed the spreadsheet on the computer. Things were moving smoothly with the company. which would allow him the time away to get married and have a honeymoon as soon as he and Tess could put the event together. He still felt guilty, not so much about not being more helpful to Tess, but not realizing how much pressure the wedding, or more accurately, the families, were putting on her. Fortunately, his solution to get married as soon as they could get a preacher to the house made her happy. Happy enough that she'd allowed him to escort her to the hospital to visit Cameron. Keeping her safe was his #1 priority. He checked his watch, determining he had another 10 minutes before he needed to pick her up. He still needed to figure out what the hell he was going to do with the cursed ring sitting in his safe. Before he could ponder it too deeply, his cell phone rang. The caller ID showed D. Showalter.
Daniel,
Jack said when he answered.
Jack, is Tess there with you?
No pleasantries. But considering not long ago Daniel wanted to put him in jail for murder and steal his woman, the fact that they could talk at all was something.
No, she's visiting a friend in the hospital. She's probably got her phone off.
There was a pause.
It might be better if I talk with you first anyway.
Oh, something new on the case?
Maybe. I got a call from a DC detective this morning asking about Tim and Cal regarding an attack on Cameron Tamblyn.
We're pretty sure that whoever attacked Cameron was actually after Tess.
It still gave Jack a chill to think about seeing the lifeless body he'd thought was Tess's at the bottom of the stairs.
How good of friends are they?
Uh-oh.
Very good. Why?
What do you know of her?
That uh-oh feeling was moving quickly to something more disconcerting.
I hadn't met her when I knew Tess before. I'm told she's a broker of antiques or art or something. She lives in Europe. What's this about?
Again, there was a pause.
When the detective explained to me what happened, there was something about it, so I pulled the files. Orléans was in France about 6 months ago. That's when he purchased the ring from a private seller. But the broker was Cameron Tamblyn.
Oh, Jesus.
Jack sank into his chair. Then he started to panic. Tess was with Cameron. All his thoughts about keeping Tess safe, and she could be with a killer. Then again, just because Cameron brokered the deal didn't mean she was a murderer. In fact, maybe she was a victim.
The attack could have been directed at her after all.
It's a possibility,
Daniel said, but Jack heard doubt in his voice.
There's more.
Of course there is,
Jack muttered.
We were able to call her roommate in Paris. Turns out Cameron's brokering sometimes included questionable deals, particularly when she took up with her boyfriend.
The sinking feeling was now a full free fall.
Don't tell me Tim or Cal?
Tim.
This is bad, really bad. He couldn't imagine how Tess was going to take the news.
I'm on my way up to talk with Ms. Tamblyn.
Now?
I'm in Springfield.
Jack figured that put Daniel about 30 minutes from the hospital, depending on the traffic.
Tess is with Cameron. I'm supposed to pick her up soon.
I don't suppose you could get Tess out of there before I arrive.
Jack knew exactly why Daniel wanted Tess gone. As a lawyer, Tess would want to defend her friend.
You're asking me to tread on thin ice, Daniel.
You strike me as an agile man.
Agile or not, Jack didn't want to get on Tess's bad side a second time in one day. Then again, if Cameron was involved in what was going on, Jack didn't want Tess to prevent Daniel from getting important information. Déjà vu, he thought, as he remembered that recently he and Tess had opposing opinions of the guilt of a friend of his.
I'll see what I can do, but you need to tell her, Daniel. I'm not the only one that will be on thin ice.
So noted.
Jack knew that no matter what he did about Daniel's request, Tess would be upset, but he decided he could lessen the anger if he came clean right away, or at least after giving Daniel some time with Cameron.
How about an iced coffee? I noticed a little Java joint just up the street,
he asked Tess as they left the hospital.
Sounds good.
They walked the half block and ordered 2 iced mochas, one made with skim milk and other with extra whipped cream. The heat and humidity hung heavy in the air, so they opted to sit inside the cafe instead of on the patio.
How was your visit with Cameron?
Jack asked.
Good. She's a little down. Apparently a man is responsible.
If that man is Tim, no wonder.
I got a call from Daniel before I picked you up.
It was better to get this conversation out of the way as soon as possible.
Really? News on the case?
Tess took a long sip from her straw. Jack loved how she savored the blend of favorite tastes, chocolate and coffee.
Yes, he was able to track where Orlean bought the ring.
That could be helpful.
Yes, he got it through a broker in France a few months ago.
Tess took another long sip of her drink.
Tess?
He waited until she looked up.
The broker was Cameron.
He watched as confusion then denial crossed her face. He braced himself for her defense of Cameron, but instead she sank back in her chair.
You don't seem surprised.
I am. I was going to say no way. But why would Daniel say that if it wasn't true? That doesn't mean she's trying to kill us, though. In fact, considering what happened to her, it seems she's a victim, too.
There's more.
There's always the second shoe to drop, isn't there?
He nodded, not wanting to tell her there were actually 3 shoes.
Daniel talked to a friend of hers who said Cameron's boyfriend was a sketchy character.
That must be the guy that broke her heart. Is he after the ring?
Jack decided to treat it like a Band-Aid, getting the pain over fast and furious.
It's Tim.
Tim, the guy I bashed with a frying pan?
Tess asked in disbelief, and Jack nodded.
I can't believe it.
But there was resignation in her statement. It made Jack wonder if she'd suspected something.
The other day, when I told her about the ring, she asked where we were keeping it. She asked while looking at this ring.
So she knew the ring you're wearing now wasn't the ring in question.
Last night she offered to help us research it. I thought she was just trying to be helpful. She does know a lot about old stuff, or at least how to get information about old stuff.
But her helping would be a way she could keep track of us,
Jack said. Tess shook her head in disbelief.
Maybe she wants to help so she can give us information without letting us know her involvement.
Maybe.
But Jack wanted to err on the side of caution. He knew Tess's relationship with Cameron would cloud her judgment, so he'd be the one to maintain suspicion.
I just can't believe she's behind all this. Not the Cam I knew.
People change.
Jack didn't like seeing the sadness in Tess's eyes. Perhaps it was time to put anger in them again.
There's one more thing.
More. How can there be more?
Daniel is interviewing her.
Now?
Jack nodded.
He was in Springfield when he called me. He should be with her by now.
Tess' eyes narrowed and he prepared for the lashing.
He asked you to get me out of her room. He was afraid I'd be her lawyer.
Yes.
He waited for her to tell him what a lousy thing he'd done, but instead she grabbed her drink and took a long swig.
You're taking this very well.
I don't like it, Jack, but I get it. A part of me wants to run back there and tell her to stop talking. She needs a lawyer.
She's a big girl. She can ask for one.
Just not me.
Would you represent her?
No.
Tess was nearly pouting. He wondered if she missed being a lawyer after all.
I couldn't represent her in good conscience. I want to know who's trying to kill us and how many are going to keep trying. We won't get that information if she has a lawyer. As her lawyer, I could get it from her, but I couldn't use it to protect us.
It's a dilemma.
I'm betraying my profession.
He considered making a comment about lawyers and ethics, but decided against it.
Still, I helped you,
She said.
I slept with you when you were my client.
You couldn't help yourself.
He grinned, giving her the dimple he knew she was powerless to resist. Her lips twitched despite her attempt to keep her face unresponsive.
True, but I want to talk to her now.
That's why we're having iced coffee here instead of at home.
You knew I'd want to talk to her.
She said.
Yes.
You just wanted to give Daniel enough time to talk to her first.
Yes.
She reached out, wrapping her fingers around his tie and pulling him toward her across the table.
You're brilliant, Valentine. Sneaky, but brilliant.
Then she kissed him.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Tales from the Heart. I hope you enjoyed it, and you will be back to find out what happens next. What is Cameron's involvement with the engagement ring, and can she be trusted? Now remember, you can listen to full uncensored episodes over at reamstories.com/Jenna Harte. Just click the follow button and then select With This Ring I Thee Kill audio for all the episodes. If you'd like to read along or get ahead in the story, you can get With This Ring I Thee Kill from your favorite ebook retailer or save by buying direct from me. All the details and links you might need are just a click away in the description. Now don't miss the next episode. Hit the subscribe button so you'll know when it's posted. Thank you again for listening, and until next time, this is Jenna Harte wishing you peace, love, and happily ever after.